Subscribe to Atten Recounts right now, because we are about to deconstruct a masterclass in thermal engineering that saved thousands of families during the brutal winters of the Second World War. When the power grids failed and coal rations were slashed to near zero, the standard central heating systems of the 1940s became useless ornaments. However, civilians in occupied Europe and the besieged cities of Britain discovered that they could manipulate the laws of thermodynamics to turn a single, tiny heat source into a functional radiator system that warmed entire rooms for hours. This was not about magic. It was about the 1940s radiator hack that heated entire homes with zero electricity, which utilized thermal mass and convective currents to amplify meager energy. For the serious history buff or survivalist, understanding how to scavenge and redirect heat without a single watt of electricity is the ultimate skill in self-sufficiency. We are moving past the surface-level history to look at the raw mechanics of wartime heat amplification. The science of thermal mass allowed scavenged heat to be stored and radiated slowly. The core principle behind the 1940s radiator hack was the transition from convective heating to radiant heating. In a standard setup, a fire warms the air, which quickly rises to the ceiling and escapes through drafts. World War II survivors realized that to stay alive, they needed to trap that energy in a dense material that could hold it. They utilized high-density materials like firebricks, large river stones, or even heavy cast-iron pots filled with sand. By placing these objects near a small candle or a single burning log, the material would absorb the thermal energy over several hours. Once the primary heat source died out, these dense objects would continue to emit infrared radiation, effectively acting as a battery for heat. This allowed a family to keep a room above freezing temperatures long into the night. To apply this today, you can place several bricks or a large Dutch oven filled with dry sand atop a wood stove, or even a small camping stove. Once heated, move the vessel to a central location in your living space where it will radiate heat for hours after the stove is extinguished. Improvised clay pot radiators utilize the chimney effect to circulate warm air. One of the most ingenious hacks developed during the war involved the use of nested terracotta pots to create a localized convection heater. By inverting a small clay pot over a flame, and then placing a larger pot over the first one, survivors created a thermal chamber. The air between the two pots would heat up rapidly, creating a vacuum effect that pulled cold air from the floor up into the bottom of the device. As the air heated, it was forced out of the hole in the top of the outer pot, creating a steady stream of warm, circulating air. The clay itself acted as a radiator, while the internal structure acted as a furnace. This device could raise the temperature of a small sealed room by several degrees, using nothing more than a few ounces of oil or a thick beeswax candle. If you need to replicate this, you must ensure the pots are unglazed and porous. Secure them with a long bolt and washers to create a small air gap between the layers, and elevate the entire assembly on bricks to allow oxygen to reach the flame. The strategic use of reflective shielding prevented heat loss into exterior walls. Back in the 1940s, insulation was often, pretty primitive or even non-existent, which meant that much of the heat generated by a fireplace or an improvised heater was immediately absorbed by those cold brick or stone walls. To counter this, civilians utilized reflective shielding made from scavenged tinfoil, polished metal trays, or even foil-lined cigarette packaging. By placing these reflective surfaces behind their heat sources, they force the infrared heat to bounce back into the center of the room, rather than bleeding into the exterior masonry. This effectively doubled the perceived heat output without increasing fuel consumption. Now, this is a critical lesson for modern survivalists. You can apply this by placing a folding emergency mylar blanket or a sheet of plywood covered in heavy-duty aluminum foil behind any radiator or space heater. That ensures the thermal energy is directed toward the occupants of the room, significantly increasing the efficiency of your heating setup during a power outage. Passive water radiators leverage the high specific heat capacity of liquid. Water, you see, has one of the highest heat capacities of any common substance, a fact that was, in a way, weaponized by WWII families to maintain warmth in their beds and living areas. They would fill large metal canisters or glass bottles with boiling water and wrap them in wool scraps. These functioned as portable radiators. Because water loses its heat much more slowly than air or metal, these containers would stay warm for 6 to 8 hours. Families would often line the perimeter of their survival room with these containers to create a thermal buffer against the cold. For a practical application today, you should keep a large stock of heavy-duty glass or stainless steel bottles. In an emergency, heat water over a fire or gas ring, fill the bottles and place them at the base of your seating or sleeping area. Covering the bottles with a heavy rug will slow the heat release even further, providing a steady source of warmth through the coldest part of the night. Strategic room shrinking and airlock systems protected the thermal integrity of the heated space. The most effective radiator hack was useless if the heat was allowed to dissipate into empty rooms. WWII survivors practiced extreme room shrinking, sealing off every room in the house except for one central area where the family lived, slept, and cooked. They used heavy wool rugs and blankets to drape over doorways, creating an improvised airlock. They even went as far as to hang blankets 3 inches away from windows, creating a pocket of dead air that acted as a secondary layer of insulation. This prevented the radiator from having to work against the entire volume of the house. To implement this, identify the smallest, most central room in your home. Use tension rods and heavy thermal curtains to seal it off from hallways. By reducing the volume of air you need to heat, your improvised clay pot or brick radiator becomes 10 times more effective at maintaining a survivable temperature. The ingenuity of the 1940s reminds us that survival is often a matter of mastering basic physics rather than owning the most expensive gear. These radiator hacks allowed our ancestors to outlast some of the most brutal conditions in human history, using nothing but scrap metal, clay, and stones. These skills are evergreen and essential for anyone who takes preparedness seriously. If you found this breakdown of historical thermal engineering valuable, subscribe to Atten Recounts right now. Share this guide with your community to ensure that this forgotten knowledge stays alive.